It seems like in only the past couple of months, several porn stars have died at young ages, and it's really tragic. And I think that we need to ask why. There are plenty of obvious answers, but first I just want to go through some examples. Most recently, it was announced only a few days ago that adult star Sophia Leone was found unresponsive in her room and pronounced dead at only 26 years old. And interestingly, this is now being investigated as a possible murder, according to her modeling agency. They tweeted, "To be clear, Sophia's death is being investigated as a robbery and a homicide. We're going to take time off social media because this is difficult, but we do appreciate seeing the stories from people who knew her. We all agree she was a sweetheart, kind, and gentle. We all love her."
We got a $50 super chat here from No Diggity 24/7 says, "Hello, crisis actors. I super chat to my favorite podcast because it's my birthday. 45 years and grateful for every one of them, no matter what has happened along the way. Here's to many, many more. Let's go!"
Love the energy.
And
happy birthday.
Happy birthday, my friends. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, but thanks for giving us a gift.
Yes. and just think, like, the age you are now is the age Robert Pattinson will probably be when the Batman 2 comes out.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's something to be proud of. But yeah, that's still being investigated. That was just the most recently reported death. Before that, Emily Willis, another adult star, went into a coma last month after she had a heart attack that there are conflicting reports it may or may not have been induced by a drug overdose. And to this day, she is still unresponsive in the hospital. She's on a ventilator. And her family says that they're preparing for the worst. They're preparing for her not to wake up. And that's a familiar story that, you know, drug abuse is a huge problem in the adult entertainment industry. It's almost universal, and it seems like a coping mechanism that a lot of them use. And then before that, Cagney Lynn Carter committed suicide only in February. That was February 20th. And it was in an especially gruesome way with a shotgun to the mouth. And she was only 36 years old. And then before that, back in January, Jessie Jane died along with her boyfriend of an apparent overdose, and she was 43. And just in general, it's obviously tragic when anyone dies young, but I think that it's especially dark knowing what goes on in that industry and the amount of exploitation, the type of people that are attracted to that career path. I mean, if you can even call it that. And you have to have some pre-existing issues, some pre-existing traumas and desperation to end up in that position.
I do wonder if the Emily Willis stuff, if it was a reaction to withdrawal. You know,
that's a possibility.
I don't know I don't know what she was in for, but if she was in there for alcohol or benzos, it is very possible to get very sick and even die from the withdrawal from those.
Right. It says that Emily Willis was in rehab for 8 days before she suffered a cardiac arrest while in treatment.
Yep.
While law enforcement sources previously said that she was brought in for an overdose, her father says that doctors told the family from her early toxicology screen came back negative, so nothing was in her system, according to the doctors. Yeah. So it's impossible to know because there are conflicting reports. But nevertheless, it's clear that a lot of these people are using drugs as a coping mechanism for the horrifying stuff that they have to do for their work, if you can call it work, if you can call that a real career path.
Right.
I think
that has to be mentally draining.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously paid more for the more extreme things you're willing to do, and that means you have to continue going past your boundaries, going past what you were comfortable with doing at the beginning in order to stay relevant. And someone noted when they went to the AVN Awards, if you don't know, this is the Adult Video Awards for porn stars, there was a 5-minute presentation called In Memorandum, which gave tribute to all the adult entertainers who died in the last year. 5 minutes long. I was shocked how many had died. Since I left the industry in 2020, there are at least 5 performers who I knew personally that have died. This is tragic. This is not a coincidence. The porn industry destroys people's will to live.
Yeah, and I think a big, I wouldn't know the cause of deaths on a lot of those, but I think right now, heavy drug use, whether we can speculate on coping mechanism or you're just a recreational drug user who becomes a habitual drug user, fentanyl probably plays a huge role in that, impurities in drugs, in conjunction with the career that leads you down that path, could play a huge role in that.
And then you enter like a gray area of, is this a suicide? Because, you know, if someone has died of an apparent overdose, they probably were already at the point where they didn't care whether they were going to die.
Yeah.
And it's sort of in that gray area of whether they intended to or not. But they're probably using drugs as a form of escape from having to think about the horrific things that they've experienced. And I'm just, you know, tired of the constant mantra, like, sex work is real work. Sex work is real work. Like, if this were congruent with every other career path, then we wouldn't see this extremity of comorbidity that comes with it.
There actually is another career path that correlates with this, and that's pro wrestling back in the day, which is because of injuries, drug addiction was extremely prevalent, right? So there was a lot of deaths. I mean, every year there's a very similar situation where a lot of wrestlers used to end up dying very, very young because they would get hooked on drugs and eventually overdose, you know, on top of, you know, the steroids and all the other things that mess with your body. What was interesting to me with all of these cases, I think with all of them, is that, you know, the women in these industries, they do make better money than the men. That is a fact. But GoFundMes were set up for all of these. Now that could be because the family doesn't have you know, if they don't know if it's their money and you have to wait for a funeral to be out of, you know, your funds to be out of probate or something after someone dies or whatever. But it's like they're starting GoFundMes to pay for this, and people were rightfully asking, they're like, what's the point of, you know, of taking this career path if you don't even have enough money to pay for your funeral? And of course, there's also the discussion that was going on a lot of times when these things happen. There's a lot of, you know, cruelty in the comment sections of these, you know, when these things happen. And, you know, if you work in the industry, I think a lot of them expect it and they understand that it comes with the territory. But as, you know, the next generation of people are born into these industries, and we have the be kind mantra for everything, and you're supposed to just accept everything at face value, not understanding that the fact of the matter is, in the real world, there are going to be people who disagree with your way of life. And there is going to be a lot of hypocrisy. There will be a lot of men in those comment sections who will absolutely watch your videos and then degrade you and treat you like shit, you know, commenting publicly. And they have a real big issue with that hypocrisy, despite the fact that it's just going to be baked into what you've chosen to do for a living.
That was specifically in a lot of the responses to the death of Cagney Lynn Carter, the one who shot herself. When her death was announced, I looked in the comments. I didn't see a lot of hate or negativity, but I did see a lot of people just kind of making it into a punchline. And that's kind of horrifying as well, that, you know, these videos of her are going to be on the internet while she is rotting and decomposing in the ground, while she is a skeleton 6 feet under the ground somewhere. And that's just, you know, some really horrifying stuff to think about. And I think that also, like, from listening to interviews with people who left the porn industry, you can tell that it kind of operates in a cult-like fashion where, you know, despite talking about like sexual liberation and expressing yourself and everyone is free to do whatever they want, you're only free to do whatever you want if you're doing what they want you to do. So once you leave, especially if you say it's because you now have a moral objection to doing it anymore, to doing sex work anymore, they will shun you. There's like a shunning practice, and there is an even worse response where they're like dedicated to spreading more content of you after you've quit, because that makes it like rarefied, like you're a rare product now, and they specifically enjoy making sure this content is still up and spreading this content when they know that it makes you uncomfortable that this is still on the internet. And if this were like any other profession or industry, it wouldn't operate like that, you know? And the stigma, in a way, it's enforced from the inside, not from the outside.
I wonder sometimes how, because we were talking before the show, like they get kind of broad brush now as like OnlyFans girls. And that's kind of like, if you look at somebody like Mia Khalifa, who, worked in the industry years ago and spun it off into a profession in other industries, and then of course doing her own content, and a lot of them see a lot more freedom in doing it on their own, where there's no boss, there's certainly less people that can profit off of your actions, right? But I don't think that does away with perhaps the feeling it might give you to work in an industry like that. We had the one video we did ages ago where the woman talked about how she had to quit doing it after like a year, and it made her, she could no longer be interested in men because of the way men would talk to her on the platform.
On OnlyFans, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is often framed that OnlyFans is the ultimate solution for women who want to sell their sexuality online, that, now you aren't at the mercy of these studios and agents and directors and stuff. You're not going to have to work for anybody. You work for yourself. You're the one who's in charge. You decide what you're comfortable doing. But I think that is also a false promise, and it's a get rich quick scheme. And from what I've been doing, compiling all of these horrible stories about women doing OnlyFans, it's definitely not the magic solution that anyone has been looking for.
I wonder if that's why there's been an increase in deaths. Do these awards include like OnlyFans girls?
I don't think this is an increase in deaths. I think that the rate has always been high.
Right. Well, I'm saying the rate is like probably
there's just
the
more
same.
people doing it.
Yeah, because it's easier to access that career now than it ever was before. You can just do it from your home.
Well, I guess like all of these girls, they weren't specifically on OnlyFans, but it's just interesting that in the span of like not even 2 months, all of these stories have come out back to back, and this conversation isn't really being had because it's uncomfortable. And I think that you can tell from the comments that, if people don't want to give up their porn, they're not going to acknowledge the ethical issues with it,
right?
With the way that it's made.
And it's kind of sad, but I think people care less because they're porn stars, which should also be another reason to deter people from choosing that industry and, saying sex work is work, but at what cost? Like, it's more than just your body, and it's more than just the moral cost. It's the cost of you being seen less potentially as a person.
Yeah, and not like I think that's right or anything. Like,
right.
I'm
not
celebrating that that's the response, but it's the reality.
Right.
If you're only perceived as a sexual object, you're not going to be regarded as a whole person with your own interior life. You're kind of resigning yourself to that dehumanization if you go into this line of work, if you want to call it that.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.